After the death of the Buddha, his disciples spread his teachings throughout Hindu India and Ceylon, the present-day Sri Lanka. Ajanta, to the northeast of Bombay, is the location of one of the oldest Buddhist sites. This immense monument, half a kilometre in diameter, was dug into the rock in the shape of a half circle. Each new monk dug his own sanctuary. Therefore, the temple was a building site for over 1,000 years. In the oldest cave, the sculptures and frescoes date back to 200 BC. The restoration work is meticulous. Each image is cleaned with a solvent, centimetre by centimetre, and Buddhist symbols gradually reappear. In this, the oldest known fresco, the believers are praying in front of Kalachakra, the Wheel of Law, an ancient Indian symbol, and not in front of an image of the Buddha.
This is the Kalachakra, and people are, you can see here, people with the folded hands here, with the people with the folded hands here. On this side, people with the folded hands, they are worshipping the Kalachakra, which is the sign of Lord Buddha.
The Indian artisans told the story of the Buddha without ever representing him, other than in the form of a lotus, a horse without a rider, or a tree. This was a way of honouring the instructions of the Buddha Sakyamuni to never represent his image. This would only be respected until the 2nd century BC. In neighbouring caves, many depictions of the Buddha were found sculptured into the rocky wall. They were made 300 years after the Kalachakra frescoes, which was the length of time it took before prohibition was no longer respected. It was nothing less than a revolution. After the death of Sakyamuni, 8 of his disciples collected the ashes of their master and distributed them in 8 different locations throughout India, which became sanctuaries or the stupas. During the next 2 centuries, these wandering monks, living on charity, would spread Buddhism throughout the north of the Indian subcontinent. Another century passed before Buddhism reached the province of Gandhara in Bactria, a region located between the present-day Afghanistan and Pakistan. For almost a century, the descendants of the soldiers Alexander left behind during his conquests had colonized the kingdom. The Buddhists set about founding hundreds of monasteries throughout the kingdom. In addition to the descendants of Alexander's soldiers, the local populations that Buddhist missionaries discovered also included Greek settlers coming from Greece, Egypt, and Antioch. In other words, a world deeply marked by Greek culture. This was the first meeting between Buddhism and Greek thinking, and it would be a fundamental one. A flourishing type of art started in this region. It owed its existence to the artists and artisans originating from the Mediterranean, who adapted their skills to local tastes. It is revealed in the architecture, the statues and paintings, and is called Greco-Bactrian art. Bactria, the Greek colony furthest away from the Mediterranean, was governed by kings and a local aristocracy. In common with Alexander the Great, the Greco-Bactrian kings were characterized by their open-mindedness and their respect for the beliefs of other populations. The most well-known sovereign was Menander, who ruled Bactria in the 2nd century BC. When the Buddhist monks arrived in Bactria, Menander decided to question one of them, called Nagasena, an old Buddhist sage. How do the teachings of Buddha resolve the problem of suffering? How can you attain enlightenment and overcome death? Over 300 of these exchanges between the two men on the meaning of life and death were compiled, enabling the sage to express the spiritual message of Buddhism. These dialogues were translated into Chinese, and for several centuries would serve as fundamental texts for teaching Buddhism. This face-to-face encounter constitutes the first meeting between Buddhism and Greek philosophy.